In this video, we're looking at the function nodes in Avairto. So there are three nodes. There is begin function, end function, and do function. And basically, a function on screen has to have a beginning and an end. So it's almost like the start and stop sequence, which is the main sequence, only we can break out functions into their own sequences. So in this case, I have a begin function that I called artist. And I can put as many steps as I want within that function, and I just have to make sure that it ends with an end function. And to do that, I just drag begin function on screen. I drag some nodes in between, and terminate my function with an end function. It's that simple. So it's basically a way to break out from the main loop, and maybe you have some complex or simple process that you want to conduct that just doesn't make sense or might clutter up the main loop. So this gives you a way to do that. To call it, I enter a do function in the main loop. So in this case, my do function, I'm calling artist, which is calls directly the begin function for the artist function of that same name. And this process is pretty simple. It starts with a human in the loop. It asks what kind of image would you like to draw, and notice the human in the loop is ID 7. Next, it calls the do function artist, which jumps down here and begins that function. It opens stability SD3, a stable diffusion image prompt, and it gives it ID 7, response 7, which is our description of the image we want. Basically does that, ends the function, and that's it. Then it would go from there to stop. So if I run this sequence, what kind of image do we want to draw? I'll say panda on a bike. Hit submit. Okay, and that ran through that sequence, and it generates this panda on the bike. So in the timeline here, we can see it starts. It goes to the human in the loop. It goes to the model function call, and then the begin function does the function and does a function return, which is the end function, and then it stops. So it did exactly what we want it to do. This gets really powerful for complex flows. So this is a flow that writes a 5-chapter book. It starts with a create variable and kind of creates an empty book at the beginning, and then it appends to this as it goes through. The first function we're calling is called plan chapters, and you'll notice that there's a number of repeats option. I can repeat a function as many times as I want when I call it. So I'm going to plan chapter just once, and this goes down to the plan chapters function. It asks the user to describe a book, and then it uses OpenAI to write a comprehensive outline for a 5-chapter book based on the user description. After that, it lets the user edit the outline and make any changes before it continues. And that's powerful because the outline is really going to drive the book. So if there are any updates or just tweaks the user wants to make to the outline, they can do it at this point. At that point, it ends function, goes back to the main loop, and then it does another function. It does the write chapters function. This time it's doing it 5 times because we asked it for a 5-chapter book, and it's going to do the write chapter function 5 times. So it goes to the begin, goes to another OpenAI prompt. This time it says review the chapter outline and previous chapters, if any. Write chapter, and there's a variable here, current function loop, and that always pulls in the current iteration that we're in. So that this will be number 1 the first time through. So write chapter 1 of the book, include all elements in the chapter outline. The overall tone and characters should remain consistent with the previous chapters, if any. Never use special markup or special characters to indicate formatting, and then it refers to the chapter outline, which is response 13, and that's our edited version of the chapter outline that we did in the earlier function. The previous chapters, it's referring to response 3, which is our final content variable up top. So it's always pulling in the chapters that it's written so far, and also the chapter outline. So it has complete awareness of the book that's been created as it goes along. After that, it takes that value of the chapter that it just wrote and it appends it to our final content variable, which is right up here at the beginning. So this is final content, and as it goes along, it'll add each chapter to that final content until all the chapters have been written. Once it does that 5 times, it'll go to the next step, which is just the stop sequence. So that's the end, and we'll have written our book at that point. So I'm going to run this on the front end this time. So I've got it set up as a short code and 5-chapter book. I basically just hit go. Describe your book. Let's do basically the same prompt. Let's say a panda takes a bike ride. So something extremely simple. And now it's going through and it's writing our chapter outline for this book about a panda going on a bike ride. And so here's our chapter outline, and does a couple things. It gives us an editable version of it, and it also gives us a version below that we can look at and review. So that's our that's it. You know, it names each chapter and gives all the major plot points, and it also gives dialogue snippets, which is nice. So if I want to change anything about that, if I want to change the curious panda to the furious panda, I can do that, edit it, and that's going to be the new chapter title for that. I'll hit submit, and now it's going to write my book. So it's going through, looping through those functions, you know, 1 time each for 5 chapters. So it's going to run my function 5 times, generate a chapter for each one, and I'll pause it while it goes through. It'll take maybe a minute. Okay, so that finished. And you know, there was no more user interaction during that. It just went out and wrote the book. So here's our updated book. Here's the final content, which was, you know, empty to begin with, and it built this as it went along. There's chapter 1, and it's called The Furious Panda because I changed that in my human in the loop step. And it writes quite long chapters. So there's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, 4, and 5. So, you know, if I had asked it to do 20 chapters, I would just have to update a couple of things. I just have to go in and update my chapter outline and have it write 20 chapters instead of 5 chapters. And then I would have to update my do function for write chapters. I'd have to set that to 20 instead of 5. And that would have been a much longer book, and it would have had the same type of consistency and planning that this one does. So that's, again, a look at the do function, begin function, and end function nodes, and they're very powerful. The more you use this, I think the more you'll come to rely on functions for your Avairto automation sequences.